Hello and welcome to In the Spotlight with Quocirca, the definitive podcast on digital disruption in the print industry. I'm Louella Fernandes, Director of Quocirca, and today I'm joined by Dom Gryszan, Marketing Director of Apogee. We'll be discussing the channel opportunity in the hybrid workplace and specifically how Apogee has adapted its business to respond to changing requirements of customers over the past year. So welcome, Dom. It's great to have you here today.
Hi, Louella. Thanks very much for the opportunity. I look forward to discussing how Apogee have adapted and changed and what the future sort of looks like for us and perhaps the rest of the channel.
Yeah, so maybe we can start by if you introduce yourself and your role at Apogee and maybe give the audience a feel for what the relationship is between Apogee and HP.
Yeah, great. So I've been at Apogee for coming up to 7 years now. So I've been lucky enough to sort of grow myself and develop as a company has, which I'm sure people have seen through various acquisitions, ultimately, which came to that acquisition by HP back in 2018. So I'm responsible for all the marketing, communications, product side of things at Apogee with the team. So everything sort of online, offline that falls in the remit of the usual marketing stuff, really. So yeah, with the HP one, it's a bit of an interesting story. Obviously, I'm used to being on the side of where we're making the acquisitions, and obviously in that instance, HP came and owned Apogee, and I think there was a lot of question marks over what would the future hold for Apogee as a brand, as an organisation. Would we be swallowed up, almost become part of HP? Would we remain independent? And true to their word, we've stayed as an independent subsidiary, and that looks like the future. I know we had an announcement this week that they have a quarterly review between HP and Apogee, and there's no change in direction or vision of what that future looks like. And it's very much, working together and getting the best out of both worlds. So you've got the innovation, the experience, the technology aspect of HP, which is, a very well-known brand, reviewable brand that everybody, worldwide recognises. And then it's complemented, and I think this is where we want to keep the difference by Apogee, who are known for the service delivery. And that's really where they've grown and been able to show in the market, what they can offer, and being able to be a bit more, agile. I would say, a lot of sort of benefits a lot of people in the channel is being able to be a bit more agile rather than the ships of the manufacturers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, so I think, the relationship with HP is something that was really interesting in terms of when HP were looking to gain more traction in the A3 copier market and so on. So, and obviously that's taken a huge hit in terms of the implications for the print industry in general, with offices being closed for the past year. So, yeah, I'm curious as to how the pandemic has affected Apogee's business and where you've seen opportunities and how you're reshaping your products and strategy for the coming year to adapt and respond to the changes over the past year.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's no secret that the A3 market and the office print volumes have plummeted, really. They've dropped significantly through the various lockdowns. I think it's been particularly evident in the SMB world, where some people have, a lot of people have been furloughed or working from home. But I feel like what we've seen is obviously the public sector has continued. We've continued to support them very much, as we have done. If anything, we've seen a little bit of growth in this area, which has been fantastic. And I think it's been vitally important for us to be able to continue to support the NHS and likewise over the past 12 months. And I think the team are really proud of the efforts that has been put in there. But from a corporate point of view, I know larger organisations, similar to ourselves, we've remained operational. We've had to adapt, and it's been interesting to see. I pulled together a whole visual of what we thought the world would look like 12 months ago. And it's interesting even just now to reflect back and see what we got right and actually what of that has stuck and what hasn't. I'd say one of the big things is, in postal processes, mail optimization, as we call it, and there's certain things that businesses will always need. And I think the acceleration of sort of digital transformation, as the buzzword goes, is really evident. People, all businesses, all shapes and sizes have recognised that the benefits of digital and where things have, you might talk in a pub and go, yeah, well, I know we could move to the cloud, or I know we could do this and where we could do that, but there's not necessarily the urgency and the business necessity, where I think the pandemic has pushed people rather than allowed them to jump, which would have taken a little bit longer.
Yeah, and that's absolutely what we've seen in the research we conduct, which has been throughout the pandemic, is that digitization and digital transformation initiatives have really accelerated. And like you say, they've compressed the timeline for those, from potentially years to months. And that's had a knock-on effect in terms of adoption of the cloud and so on as well. So in terms of this, the hybrid workplace that we're operating in now, are there any particular sort of new service directions that Apogee is taking? I know that you've always had quite sort of strong offerings on the digital mail side, but how about cloud printing, workflow services, and so on? Is that something that Apogee is expanding on?
Yes, certainly. So we have a couple of key, obviously, cloud partners. Cloud has naturally evolved over the past 10, 20 years. We've done a few pieces of comms on it recently, and that's only gonna keep evolving, really. For us personally, cloud print, cloud working, cloud document management, it's all the future, isn't it? Rather than before, a lot of it was on site, on premise. What we're starting to call like infrastructureless print, where everything is moving to the cloud, and it's enabling businesses to be a lot more agile and work remotely, respond quicker. And I think, again, it's easy to sometimes see the benefits yourselves when you're absorbed in it, but to try and get the clients to understand all of that is very different. And when something works well as it is, well, I think, the cloud is very much an interesting one for the future. But for us, I mean, it leans on maybe bit of the HP story. We've seen recently the HP Instant Ink, which is predominantly aimed at, personal home users, not so much the business world, but that has, seen a huge increase in the last 12 months. So we've then again, this is, I guess, where we're lucky with our partnership with HP, where we can learn from what they've done, but actually provide a service that is right for the business world, perhaps. And it's evolved from the instant ink world, where we've got a managed ink service. So not radically different, but it enables, the home users. Taking myself as an example, I will probably work from home 2 to 3 days a week going forward, because of the benefits with that. And I need to be able to print, maybe not on the same scale as we did previously. So we're really seeing an increase in that. And, it's not necessarily the profitability, but there's the necessity to print. And I think that, shouldn't be underestimated, that businesses do still need that. So that's been a big one for us. And then I guess also the other side, another arm of our string to our bow is our outsourced services. So we have seen an increase, and we launched almost a web to print portal, which we provided to clients, but also the ability for people to go onto our one source portal, and very much upload your document, print it, it's delivered to your door next day, that kind of thing. So if you don't want to commit to all the the kit technology to being at home, then you have that option, which is more feasible for a lot of organisations. So, that's been revamped. I think we're on stage 3 because it's just evolved so much.
Yeah, and I think actually the home printing, we could probably talk about that in depth if we needed to, but I guess, like you say, the relationship with HP has really kind of helped you engage in that market. And I'm just curious as to, with our research, we see that a lot of the home printing support is either the the end user has actually purchased the printer themselves directly from Amazon or online e-commerce platform, or the business has actually used something like Amazon Business to purchase home printers. And I think there's potentially a gap where the channel hasn't been able to address the requirements for those home workers. But it sounds like Apogee has, because they've got the relationship with HP and you've got your own managed ink service, that you've somehow managed to circumvent that and get those customers to come to Apogee directly. Is that correct?
Yeah, well, I would say it was sort of a gap that no one saw coming. We've done a bit of hybrid mail. There's other things that you can very quickly adapt. But actually, when you've spent however many years driving an A3 market, to then all of a sudden it be switched off overnight and then be told you need to, the A4 market's where it's going to be, because people know how to print efficiently, securely, is very important from home. Not everybody could adapt overnight to that. And it's a lot of investment, not just from the manufacturers, but from clients as well. So I think from a channel point of view, ensuring you've got not just the device, but also, the support alongside that. It's one of the things we've seen from clients is how can you securely support something at home that fits with all their guidelines, policies, etc. So, I think we've adapted well to that. We've learned from a couple of things at the beginning, as you always do. But we're in I'd say, really good place with our managed ink service at the moment, and we're almost ready to make a little bit more noise about that. So watch your space. Yeah,
no, that's good. And I think you touched on the security there as well. And so with your managed print service offerings, and, because of the potential security concerns around office workers now printing at home and potentially not adhering to the same security guidelines as they would do in the office, are you seeing more demand for security type assessments, or is that something Apogee is expanding on, or do you not see, or perhaps maybe customers aren't as aware of those security vulnerabilities as they may be?
I mean, I would say more from personal experience that security is perhaps the number one issue or tick box. It's not necessarily the equipment. Is it secure? Moving into a home environment is completely different to any office environment. And as I said, especially more in the larger corporates, that is, we are seeing, maybe not red tape, but there are more hurdles to jump, things to jump, and just make sure that you still are abiding by all those policies and rules. There's a lot of legal companies who work with finance, insurance and stuff like that. It is critically important that these devices, and I have to say, I think that's where we are, again, fortunate with our relationship with HP, who are renowned for their security. Their devices are very secure. It's always been a big factor for them. And, that's where I think it started at the beginning, their technology and innovation complemented with our service. And that's where we can really push into the market. And I think that the channel will start to spot those opportunities also in the future.
So just picking up on that, sort of the opportunities for the channel in the hybrid workplace, are there any particular areas? So we talked about cloud, security, digital mail, workflow, and, they're obviously kind of high-level trends for, like you say, businesses of all sizes. What do you think are the key challenges for the channel in, the recovery, I guess, in that at the moment we don't know with the return to the office whether print volumes will return to pre-COVID levels, and I'm just interested in what your thoughts are and where you maybe see the challenges as well as opportunities.
Well, I think, we've talked on a lot of the opportunities and been able to come out of this in a positive way. But there will be challenges, and I think before all this, people were anticipating Brexit and potentially the impact that could have on UK-based or organisations. But I think for us, the pandemic will, and well, not just us, the whole industry and other industries will be supply chain. We know we've seen already and we've heard around certain issues that perhaps will be around the corner. We are best places, a lot of organisations are, to have backup alternatives, etc. But it will be no secret that over the coming months there will be a bit of an issue around supply chain. And once over that sort of bump, I'm sure it'll be plain sailing. But I think the coiled spring, as the government's calling it, I think if there is a boom, that's where there will be a bit of a stretch. In certain industries, I say beyond MPS, it will be a lot wider than that. And then, as I said, once that spring comes back down and the demand, the stock will be able to handle demand in time. And I think, one of this is it kind of overshadowed Brexit. So we haven't really seen any significant impact of that since the pandemic. And I guess, again, we touched on it briefly. Security will always be a huge factor for organisations. For businesses like ourselves, there's always going to be a threat. So staying ahead of the game is going to be critical. And again, I think that's why we're very fortunate to be so closely linked with HP, who are obviously front runners in the security environment.
Yeah, so you touched upon also your work with public sector, and where you saw that was pretty much stable in terms of business over the past year. Are there any other vertical markets that you're particularly focused on, or you're seeing more opportunities as we move forwards this year?
We do have, so we have worked closely with the legal sector, particularly with our outsourced document services. So they, as sort of said, the outsourced document services has been a nice add-on to what we've previously complemented our managed print services. But we've learned a hell of a lot about that in the last 12 months, but also our clients have. So I think in terms of verticals, definitely from the legal sector, they are relying on a lot of outsourcing from a document and print. It's not just print as well. I must add on that. And certainly, say the finance, accounting, insurance sectors as well. I think a lot of, again, I haven't got the stats necessarily to back this up, but a lot of larger corporates who are based in London, I think will be different, because there's less of an appetite to jump back into the office for those that are based outside of London. And I think that's a big question mark for us, and we won't know really until we see those numbers. As I said, I think people, I'm not speaking for everyone, perhaps is looking forward to getting back into the office and a bit of socialisation. And I think from outside of London, people who commute in is very different. So I think from those verticals, the ones that I say are typically based in London, I think we will see a different demand from that. And as I say, we have done quite a lot of work with the insurance sector as well recently. Yeah, that will remain a big focus for us. Okay.
I think, it's been interesting just sort of listening to you and just sort of understanding where, the different challenges and opportunities are for the channel in general. And, we talked about cloud and security and digitization and how everything has accelerated over the past year. And I think, for the channel, and, there's always been something that Quocirca has talked about, is the need to adapt and innovate. And it's not really just the channel, but, also the manufacturers as well. And yeah, I'm just interested into your views as what you think maybe will be coming next for the print industry. Will there be more market consolidation? I think that's what we expect to see, just because of the past year having such sort of dramatic implications for the industry in terms of offices being shut. But yeah, do you think there's going to be any major changes over the coming year in terms of the market landscape?
I think there's two things here, and one was an announcement made by a manufacturer in the last week or so, that I think one of the main things is that print is slightly on a decline, but there's there's clouds on the rise, so there's things that will complement it or outweigh where perhaps there's lesser demand in this area. There will be other demand, and I think if the channel manufacturers are prepared for that, i.e. document management, you still will need the documents. You may not need to print them, but the document workflows, processes, etc. are critical for a business to operate. That won't change. So I think that is definitely going to be an area of focus. I think if people are best placed and ready for that change to adapt, that will be key. And I think the obvious one, we've talked about it, and it will it will come out more and more in the coming months. But the transition from managed print services to move more into a managed IT services and that world. And I think that's a really interesting space. And I think there's a lot of talk of various companies making that move. And likewise, we've all worked from home and needed IT equipment. You may not have needed to print, but it's the same, ensuring that you've got the right equipment around you. And more like for us, more of a transition into sort of a managed workplace in being able to adapt. And a lot of our solutions and services are applicable and benefit organisations, irrespective of location. It's just ensuring that is understood and delivered in the right way. But yeah, I do think the next 12 months, the IT world, the cloud, they will be the big drivers in the market.
Yeah, no, absolutely agree. And I think that's, a great point to end on, is that the evolution of MPS is now moving to managed workplace services. It has for some time, but obviously the pandemic has accelerated that. And I think, potentially those channel partners and OEMs that are already making that move are best positioned to, not only survive but thrive over the coming 12 months. So, so just on a final note, obviously we've talked on sort of fairly serious topics around the print industry, but on a more light-hearted note, obviously we're seeing that, that I guess we're turning a corner in terms of the pandemic, and we'll soon be released from lockdown in the UK, at least. So, what would be the first place that you plan to travel to first, or, what would be the first thing you would do once we're released from lockdown?
Well, for me, I think a lot of people would jump on a plane, but actually for me, I had my first daughter was born just before lockdown. So to be honest, to take her to a zoo or something like that, the things that everyone took for granted before, I'd jump at the chance to, we snuck in an aquarium visit in the summer, but I think, a trip to the zoo would be top of my list.
Oh, very good. Oh, well, hopefully that won't be too far off. But thank you very much again, Dom, for joining us on today's podcast episode. For more information on Quocirca and the podcast series, please go to quocirca.com, and I look forward to seeing you again on the next episode.